Prosecutors from the International Criminal Court are reportedly interviewing staff from 2 hospitals in the Gaza Strip. That's after the discovery of mass graves on the grounds of the 2 facilities. Hundreds of bodies were recovered from 3 mass graves on the premises of the Nasser Hospital in Khan Younis this month. And the remains of dozens more people were exhumed at al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City after an Israeli siege of the facility. Both hospitals were left badly damaged and out of service after Israeli troops withdrew. Let's go straight to Al Jazeera's Tareq Azzoum, who's in Rafah for us in southern Gaza. So, Tareq, what more have you found out about these ICC investigators interviewing staff at Nasser Hospital and al-Shifa Hospital? Who were they talking to and about what precisely?
Well, precisely, Folly, the prosecutors of the International Criminal Court have been speaking to a number of Palestinian medics who have been working in al-Shifa Hospital in the north and even in Nasser Hospital in Khan Younis in the south after the Israeli withdrawal. They have been talking about possible crimes committed by the Israeli military during their existence inside the medical facility, but yet the identities of those medics are still unknown for security concerns and security reasons, as the International Criminal Court's office have been saying that they did not provide any proper comment about the operational procedures and investigations being made with those eyewitnesses in order to guarantee the full protection. And we have been clearly remember what was going on in such hospitals in terms of the mass graves being discovered, where hundreds of bodies found decomposed, and they have been found also have been buried in deeper in sand, with pile of waste and sand have been thrown over such bodies. But yet the Israeli side have been saying that they have no longer, let's say, care about what the International Court of Justice might take in terms of actions against Israeli soldiers, as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that he will try to afford the full protection for the Israeli soldiers under his own leadership. But it's absolutely terrifying, as what we do know is that we've been hearing from the Gaza Civil Defense crews saying that there are still at least 10,000 Palestinians messing under the rubble of the destroyed houses in multiple areas across the territory, as the accumulation of these bodies, especially when during the onset of the summer season, had contributed to increase the spread of diseases and even epidemics, as till now they are struggling in order to recover such injuries and victims from under the rubble of the destroyed houses.
Tareq, thank you very much for the update. That's Al Jazeera's Tareq Azzoum reporting there live from Rafah. Well, let's discuss this further now with Geoffrey Nice, who's a human rights barrister who led the prosecution of Slobodan Milosevic at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. He's joining us from Canterbury. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Nice. So we heard there Gaza Hospital staff questioned by investigators of the ICC. What does this suggest to you? What happens next in the process, and what's likely to be the outcome of these investigations?
A number of questions rolled into one, and the last one very difficult to answer. Likely outcome always a bit uncertain. But this is, I think, interesting and good news. Going in sequence and keeping a cool head about things, examination either directly or through the testimony of others of what may be a crime site is extremely important and potentially very valuable in evidence terms. We may have discussed this before, but how bodies are found in a mass grave, whether they're all killed in the same way, whether their hands were tied behind their back, whether they've been tortured beforehand or not, is itself going to show, simply as step one, whether a crime may have been committed. There's other ways in which it may be shown that a crime has been committed, simply by the number of people killed who are innocent, by what's shown of the individuals, looking at their clothing or their property, and so on and so forth. So you look at the scene and you decide, if you can, whether there's evidence there of a crime being committed. Once you reach the position that there is such evidence, you may seek, you may find some surviving eyewitness to what happened, and you take account of that, what that eyewitness says. If that eyewitness points to commission of the crime by the Israeli Defense Force or any part of it, you need to know first whether the particular unit is identified. Doesn't matter necessarily if not, but you work your way steadily up until you reach as high as you can get. But what you may hear from some is skepticism about the possibility of ever drawing a link between the crime at the bottom, not the crime where it happens, and links rising in the chain. And what you then have to take into account is the following. Properly constructed military forces, armies such as the IDF, have a chain of command from the top working down. And you must reasonably assume that that chain is in place. And therefore, you can demand information from Israel if it doesn't provide it voluntarily, of if you reach the position of knowing that something has been committed by a military group, demanding to know who the group is, and working out from there how the chain of command goes up. If you look back, it may always be said that, oh, this was a rogue unit.
Right.
And there had been rogue units in the Vietnam, where there was a very famous rogue unit at My Lai. But it sounds as though Netanyahu is standing by his men. If he's standing by his men, that may say the chain of command was intact.
Okay. Now, as this is happening, these investigators are talking to staff at these two hospitals in Gaza, Mr. Nice. There have also been many reports in Israeli media in recent days that the ICC is investigating Israeli actions not just in Gaza, but also in the occupied West Bank, and that there could be arrest warrants issued for Israeli and Hamas officials. Would that be part of the same case as the mass graves in Gaza, or a separate case? Would there be a link between the two?
One assumes it would be part of the same overall case. And indeed, it has even been suggested that the overall case that might be raised against the state of Israel could go back to and include what happened as long ago as 2014, when jurisdiction was first granted to the International Criminal Court. So, although you can't be sure, what we're concerned about here, obviously, is the overall driving mental state of the leadership of the state of Israel's defense force. And that means what is the mental state of the intention, if you like, not quite the same meaning, but the intention of the Israeli leadership, military and political.
Right.
It is that, if anything, which is going to join things together.
Okay.
Even if, for example, at a trial, they would have to be separated out again.
Understood. Now, I wanted to ask you briefly one last question before we let you go and get your expertise and insight, because you have obviously a great deal of experience in this. There have also been reports of some pressure on the ICC not to issue these arrest warrants now, at a time when there's a great deal of effort to reach a ceasefire in Gaza, the concern being that this could jeopardize those efforts. Would the ICC take that into consideration when and if it issues these arrest warrants?
A most important point needs a much longer answer. The short answer is I'd expected there to be pressure before, and was surprised and happily surprised to see the announcement of possible arrest warrants. Once they've reached that stage, the prosecutor certainly shouldn't yield now to pressure from the United States or from Great Britain or from anywhere else. The state has been reached in the public consideration, I think, that that accountability and law should, to some extent, outweigh realpolitik. And if there has to be accountability as well as a settlement of the conflict, or at least a ceasefire, then let there be accountability. If you don't have accountability, for whatever reason, temporarily good or not so good, you open the door to future bad actions, not just by the countries presently involved, but by other countries. I've said from the beginning that both Hamas and Israeli leadership, once evidence was available that each or both had committed such offences, should be subject to an accountability process. The public expects that.
Right.
And governments that go against it will lose the support of their people.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you for your expertise. Geoffrey Nice, a former judge at the ICC, at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. Yes, sorry, a former barrister, I should say. Thank you so much for clarifying it for us. Geoffrey Nice, thank you for your time. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.